Okay, so welcome everyone. You're at the session on STEM learning ecosystems, a strategic pathway for strengthening broader impacts. I am Amanda Smith. I'm the Director of K-12 Engagement. It's a new position at Penn State. I'm also an Assistant Professor of Education and the Executive Director of Engine of Central PA, which you're going to learn a lot about of what that is and what a STEM ecosystem is.
And I'm Kathy Hill. I'm the Director of the Center for Science in the Schools at Penn State. We're a center housed in the College of Education, but we serve and work with faculty across all the STEM colleges and also many of our Commonwealth campuses in helping with broader impacts plans, particularly if they have to do with teacher professional development. But I'm also the Director of Broader Impacts for Engine of Central PA.
So first of all, what we're going to be digging into is what exactly are STEM ecosystems and how can they benefit your university and strengthen the BI components of research grants. And we're also going to be sharing our Penn State-led STEM ecosystem engine of Central PA and the current initiatives that we're getting involved in. So first of all, a STEM learning ecosystem, it's a very large, robust network of all different cross-sector partners. And you'll see from that picture, you're thinking about schools, community, higher ed, business, after school, any kind of partner that can directly impact the pre-K through 16, but I would say it's more so right now focused in pre-K through 12 and really aligning it with what are the career pathways in your state or Commonwealth? What's occurring and looking at the trajectory over the next decade on where that state or Commonwealth is going as far as STEM careers are concerned. And as we know, STEM is not going away. If anything, it's becoming more and more critical in the United States. And we know that there's a lot of great funding, especially with NSF, towards improving STEM in the pre-K through 12 sector. And so what we do as an ecosystem is really help foster a lot of these collaborations. You have a lot of organizations that never have an opportunity to sit in the same room together. We've been in so many situations where our local library and our local water conservation group have never gotten together to think about offering certain programs and really aligning it to what do schools need. And that's the essence at first of what a STEM ecosystem can do. When we started building the STEM ecosystem, and you're going to hear the story of how we got started, it really is what the STEM ecosystem world calls is a slog. It takes a long time to really start building the network across a certain region, a certain state, and starting to collaborate and coordinate opportunities together. And you'll see that what this diagram shows is over time, you really want to become very synergistic, creating opportunities together instead of in silos or apart. We work for Penn State University, a very large institution. Sometimes we feel siloed ourselves and really building a better network in ways that we can collaborate with each other. And then Harvard Medical School through the Pear Institute did a lot of analysis on a few of the STEM ecosystems that were starting up a few years ago. And really we think about a partnership diagram, if you will, if you see opportunities 1, 2, 3, and 4, about how different sectors start working together over time. Some of our larger ecosystems that have been around for almost a decade are in that 3 or 4 category where everything they do is very interconnected, not only with the schools, but with each other and thinking about how to better create opportunities for K through 12. I would say our ecosystem is really at the 1 and the 2 mark. We're starting to see more collaborations occur, and we're starting to look at how to evaluate because of this network that exists, how can we now showcase that in an evaluation type of method about these collaborations occurring through initiatives that we've started. And so currently, this has grown over time. All the dots represent a nationally recognized STEM ecosystem. And to become nationally recognized, we went through an intense 6-month process about all the ins and outs and requirements to become a STEM ecosystem. And these are your nationally recognized national ones, but we also have several international that have been popping up, which is really great when you think about it from a broader impacts perspective. We're starting to work on grants that we're involving other ecosystems because we want to work with other states and work with other communities and school systems. why the dots are different colors is just showing you what time did they come on. We're part of cohort 5, so we came on in the 5th year, and our dart is in dark blue, which is right in smack dab in the center of Pennsylvania. But you'll see that, you know, depending on where you're from, you can think about, am I tied into our local STEM ecosystem, and how do they function, but also how can higher ed function in a STEM ecosystem world? And so another important aspect of a STEM ecosystem is it was part of the Pathways for Success strategy as part of the National Science and Technology Council report in December of 2018. This was a really critical document for Penn State because every federal funding and agency, including NSF, USDA, and NIH, all came together to say, putting in a STEM ecosystem as part of your broader impacts is really going to help make your grants competitive, because it's showcasing that you have a very strong network of community organizations and schools for the programs or projects you're trying to achieve. And I'm going to let Kathy take it from here to talk a little bit more about this document and the story about Penn State.
Sure. So this document was really paramount in terms of really explaining to Penn State why us being the lead of the STEM ecosystem in the center of Pennsylvania, why this is going to benefit, you know, the university at large and also the community at large. And so this was, you know, really critical in terms of building sort of infrastructure to address broader impacts. Given where we are in the center of the state, we're very much in a rural area. We don't have easy access to schools or communities in urban centers. I mean, we can certainly drive and commute to certain urban centers, but it is quite a ways. But to form these sort of networks lets us tap into a lot of those diverse communities that we are really not in very close proximity to. Next slide, Amanda. Oh, that one, yeah. So in terms of the rationale for Penn State, so thinking about where we are located, again, we're in a very rural area. Our closest urban center is Harrisburg, which is not nearly as big as Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. And there was really no entity very close to us or large enough, close enough to serve as the lead of a STEM ecosystem. We don't reside in a STEM ecosystem until we decided we wanted to put forth our application and be considered. And then we're, you know, deemed a STEM ecosystem. You know, Pittsburgh has one, Philadelphia has several STEM ecosystems in that particular region. And then there was just the rest of the state. there was really nothing else going on. So it became quite meaningful for us to decide, how are we going to go about doing this and organizing it in a way that we can use it to benefit our broader impacts plans. So we do build it into grant proposals for federal funding agencies, but it also helps us to fulfill our land grant mission and also our university strategic plan, which includes impacting K-12 education. There are sort of a number of entities at Penn State that do work in K-12. I would say that it's kind of sort of scattered and not well networked and organized, which I think Amanda is going to be helping to address some of that in her position. But there really wasn't a lot of push behind that part of the strategic plan in terms of, you know, a lot of focus. And this has now, I think, allowed us to create the STEM ecosystem as a vehicle in order to do that work. This also helps thinking about preparing K-12 students for post-secondary education in STEM fields. We talk a lot about, even though Penn State is an institution of higher education, we certainly want to do all we can to help pre-college students in Pennsylvania be prepared and be successful in their post-secondary education endeavors, wherever that may be. And then lastly, the Pennsylvania Department of Education announced that they have a priority to create these STEM ecosystems across the state. They really want to see that all parts of Pennsylvania are located within a STEM ecosystem. You know, some STEM ecosystems have the entire state as their STEM ecosystem. This is not Pennsylvania's approach. And so right now there are certain areas that are not within the STEM ecosystem. There are some under development in certain areas. And, but we differ in a lot of ways from other STEM ecosystems. We're university led. We have a huge rural swath that we cover in Pennsylvania, which a lot of STEM ecosystems are found in urban areas, and really focus on those particular areas. And you can go on, Amanda, to the next slide. One of the challenges was really thinking about how do we handle this fiscally? So most STEM ecosystems are not institutions of higher education. They're mostly nonprofits, foundations, and they serve as sort of the hub of managing the finances of the STEM ecosystem. Penn State is not set up in such a way that they could serve as the fiscal agent of our STEM ecosystem. So we have an outside foundation that serves as our fiscal agent. So if there are contributions that are made to the STEM ecosystem, they go to the Foundation for Enhancing Communities. If that's an individual, if that's, you know, a charitable contribution on either an industry's behalf, even if we go for any kind of local or state grant, that would run through the Foundation for Enhancing Communities. However, if we build engine into our federal grants to NSF or NIH or any other federal agency, that flows through Penn State. And then that money goes out to entities that are going to be handling the broader impacts components, but that could then ultimately lead to money going to partners within Engine to benefit their activities. And that allows us to then leverage that network and how we're going to, you know, build these partnerships and relationships rather than reinventing the wheel all of the time. So the name of our STEM ecosystem is Empowering the Next Generation of Innovators and Entrepreneurs, which the acronym is ENGINE of Central PA. And we did have a competition across the ecosystem. It covers 12 counties, it's rather large, for a logo design. And there was a high school student who put forth this particular logo design, and it was selected as the winner. You know, so once logos were submitted, we put them out for voting purposes. And this one, you know, was the winner of that particular competition. So this is the logo of our STEM ecosystem.
You'll also notice that the name of our ecosystem does not have the word STEM necessarily built into it. That was purposeful. Even though we had also a voting mechanism of naming the ecosystem, because there was a beginning meeting of about 70 organizations one of our the small city that we have that's also our capital, which is Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but really uncovering what were the needs and goals, understanding what a STEM ecosystem was, but how are we going to create a STEM ecosystem, and what would be those main goals that we are going to tackle. Over time, we realized that, especially because we have a lot of rural areas, a lot of underserved areas, we also have the mission at Penn State around the Invent Penn State mission around entrepreneurship and innovation. It really came through as a strong need to look at more ways, and this is just getting off the ground of making sure there's enough opportunities and students to have access and equitable opportunities towards anything that's we could deem as innovative or entrepreneurship like. And so that was part of our title. So one thing to note, and Kathy brought this up about STEM ecosystems in Pennsylvania. One, there was a very large STEM ecosystem in Pittsburgh. There's actually two, if you can deem one inside Philadelphia, one outside Philadelphia. But there are ecosystems that are popping up in our Commonwealth. The areas in gray are just starting to form and aren't not necessarily nationally recognized. But these networks, there's a representative in each network working alongside Pennsylvania Department of Ed That was really important because Pennsylvania has put a large priority in diversifying and increasing the number of STEM ready educators and also STEM ready students in our Commonwealth, including in computer sciences. And so they utilize these networks as well to help them with their mission as well over time, and realizing that we have those interconnections of all different types of cross-sector partners that we can help any type of program or initiative that's getting off the ground as a state level approach. The goals of Engine of Central PA, I mentioned we had this really large meeting. We created 5 main goals around that meeting itself on where we were trying to go. One was educating the community around what STEM is. There's a lot of schools and parents and community that don't really know what STEM truly means. And so we define that as a Commonwealth, but we really are working hard to showcase that. And how can STEM, what does STEM look like in a school setting? How do you create multidisciplinary approaches to education in a very siloed world? Our other goal was to increase those number and support cross-sector partnerships, provide equitable access to STEM experiences for all students, and really elevate ecosystem organizations, opportunities and resources that align with that ecosystem vision. So part of this is also helping our other partners. We have other universities and colleges in our ecosystem. We really aim to make this an opportunity where we can elevate everything going on around STEM for parents, teachers, and the community. And all in all, the major area that we're looking at long-term is how are we creating more career-ready, well-informed citizens to meet the demands of the STEM workforce and community needs. So a very big partner that we do have that we intersect with is our labor and industry in Pennsylvania and our workforce development boards, and really aligning those goals and thinking about what can we do more of with our youth to help them get ready for this next decade. And so our ecosystem, and I'm going to go through some components of this. When we started working on Engine, it's kind of like, where do you start? What we have some different things that are occurring as an ecosystem and different ways that partners can plug into. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about the structure, some of the partnerships we're building and how we're building them, what project teams are, and 2 large-scale initiatives that we started during COVID. So first of all, with the structure, this is the 12 counties that Kathy mentioned in our Commonwealth. We have, I think, 67 counties, but this is about 20% landmass wise of our state. There's about 160,000 students and 11,000 educators in this region. So it's a very big region, but we can put that into broader impacts to say, this is a large network. Here's who we're serving as we build programs with NSF and USDA when we get awarded research grants. So it's a really great opportunity to showcase not just a few schools giving us support letters, but this entire large scale network. So we really, even though we work with schools outside of this of Engine, it's really important to really engage our local STEM ecosystem. And so in this structure, we have something called intermediate units. New York has a system called BOSI, but they are these hubs of education services that align with Pennsylvania Department of Ed. And that ensures that we can get communication across to all schools, the public schools, in a timely manner. And some of the partnerships we started doing, one, we're in the midst of, we've piloted an asset map. We're actually going to be asset mapping the whole state about opportunities, organizations, who they are, how they serve students and teachers, and what kind of big issues do they work on. We also had a school to business speed dating right before COVID hit us that Siemens sponsored. It was a great way to, if you think about classic speed dating, they had 5 minutes to talk, and we set up some strategy and modeled about what school to business partnerships could look like. So we had schools on one side of the table and all different kinds of businesses on the other, but we're looking to, once we come out of COVID, we did not want to do this virtually. We're going to be doing more and more of this. So just some different ways to engage partners from all different kinds of sectors. Asset mapping, I would also bring up, is very critical because in time, we want to use that so that if someone's looking for a partner, let's say on a grant, and they want to find someone that aligns with their mission, but might be serving a purpose that they don't do well at, they could find them through that asset mapping process. So it's a great way to find partners. Project teams are getting started. It's through a network called 100K in 10, which is a national STEM organization focused on helping prepare STEM-ready teachers in the United States that was under the Obama administration. But we really aligned how we're modeling how they approach project teams with all these organizations in a similar fashion. So it's a group of different organizations coming together around a key issue that they want to work on. And so we have different organizations in each of these sectors: family engagement, future work and career readiness. We have a life science consortium that started under Penn State CSATs, working with a large group of biology teachers, but also some other organizations like the Pennsylvania Biomedical Research Association. So some different groups that are coming together to help create more aligned opportunities to research in that life science realm. The Teacher Voice Council is something new we're starting around piloting opportunities with a core group of teachers throughout our region. And then the Student Leadership CSO program I'm going to talk a little bit more about, because that's turned into a very large initiative for us. So these are just different ways that different partners can plug in to a very core area. And it also allows those members to say, maybe go after a state level grant or a foundation grant, depending on the issue, as a regional based approach. So the Chief Science Officers program, our two largest initiatives. This was actually at first an NSF grant. It was an I-test grant out of Arizona State University that quickly expanded to other states. And I believe it's also in Kuwait. And in Mexico, and I think of the two other countries that have a CSO program. But this is a great opportunity where students are creating a STEM action-based project, but they have to work with their community and industry and their school board. And they have a great opportunity that they all get to go to the White House to meet with that Science and Tech Council that built that report, to really learn about how STEM education policies are formed and how they're implemented. We're seeing some of these students as they graduate high school to go into policy and work. So when I had the opportunity to meet the chief science officers out in Arizona, I quickly learned these could be our future congressmen, senators, presidents, because they're being put in the driver's seat at a very young age, but there's a lot of wraparound supports to help them create their STEM action projects. And so this is something that launched virtually this year, but we're expanding it next year throughout our region. But it's a great leadership program. The other program that we're heavily in the midst of right now is Remake Learning Days. And this actually occurs across 14 states, but it's a great way to elevate all the great things happening around STEM, art, makery, technology, student voice, outdoor learning. There's a lot of different categories, but it's a great way just to elevate all the opportunities that exist across a region in a very concentrated time frame, and it's to celebrate the end of the school year and launching into summer. But it allows families to engage in STEM alongside their child. And so we see a lot of libraries putting on these events. We have several out of Penn State. I think we have 4 or 5 right now. We also have all the PBS stations greatly involved, as far as a lot of other community organizations. So it's a great way to elevate a lot happening around STEM in our area. And so the benefits to Penn State is also really getting our community to understand how much we can do as a land grant institution to benefit our K through 12 communities. And lastly, this is just to showcase again where our ecosystem exists, how large we are, and how much we can potentially impact over time, and working to create more opportunities that are accessible and equitable to these communities. And we have several partners that engage in this work with us. They might be holding a Remake Learning Days event, or they're on a project team, or they're helping us fund an initiative, which you see here. Siemens and Pittsco are very large partners. The Foundation for Enhancing Communities is our fiscal agent, but we also have other universities at the table, and that's really, really important in just creating some of these stronger STEM pathways for students. And I'm going to turn it over to Kathy now to talk a little bit about, especially because this is ARIS, is a little bit more about the grants that have been funded with Engine being built into broader impacts.
Sure, like Amanda said, Engine is a fairly new ecosystem, and things have moved much slower than anticipated due to COVID. I mean, but that's just, I think, everybody's experience right now. But since we were deemed a nationally recognized ecosystem, we have built Engine into several grants with multiple funders. So you can see here, NSF, an NIH SEPA grant, a NOAA grant, and also a USDA ag literacy grant. So some of these are technical technical research grants that have broader impacts or some education component attached to them. And we've leveraged Engine for that. But 2 of them are actually education focused grants where we are bringing the researchers along with us as education faculty. And really in terms of the careers of science and engineering researchers, they leverage us in multiple ways, just like I described. So, I mean, they're going to write their grants to do their research, but if they have an opportunity to work with us or any other group at Penn State or any of the partners of Engine, where they're not necessarily the lead on a grant, but they are now starting to build their broader impacts agenda. We talk a lot about, particularly early career faculty, thinking about what is it that you want to be known for in your broader impacts? What do you want to do? Do you want to work with teachers? Who do you want to work with? Do you want to work with libraries? Do you want to do after school programming? What is it that you're interested in doing? And we can leverage Engine to try to find those right partners. But also, we think about, or I think about the Center for Science in the Schools and sort of what our agenda is and how we are going to leverage Engine to benefit our work, but also all of the broader impacts work that's going on at Penn State. So just to kind of summarize, the STEM ecosystem provides this network, this very robust network to improve primarily pre-K-12 or K-12 education and align those programs that we build with career pathways and careers of the future, what we foresee, coming and what the workforce says to us and to our labor and industry folks, what is it that they're going to need? We're one of many ecosystems. You may find that you already reside and operate within a STEM ecosystem if you visit their website and look at where they're located. All their websites are linked on the National STEM Ecosystem website, and they all vary as far as who leads the STEM ecosystem, how is it structured, how big is it, how many partners they have, what are their, what's their focus, what are their initiatives. So there's no one right way to do this. I think the idea of STEM ecosystems is trying to find what works regionally. So I did talk about how some of them are statewide. I personally have never really seen a strong value in that because, there are needs regionally. And what works for us is that we can, serve those 67 school districts and have partners across those 12 counties that are within a pretty reasonable commutable distance that allows us to do our work. And then we're writing this into, the broader impacts components of federal grants, and that this has been a strategy that we've just initiated. We've just started doing it. But we've certainly had positive results and success with that. So I think at this point, we're happy to answer any questions you may have about STEM ecosystems and broader impacts, or just STEM ecosystems in general.
I also put in our contact information, our contact information in our websites, but I'm happy to drop in the STEM ecosystem, the National STEM Ecosystem website for more information. And I can also put in the White House document PDF into the CVent ARIS conference platform as well for you. But it was definitely a very helpful resource in talking with the higher ups at Penn State and getting this moving, and why it was important that a R1 institution lead the STEM ecosystem, especially when we were thinking about ways of considering how do we get more STEM research out into the K through 12 realm. But like I said, it's a slog, it's a slow process. And I think Remake Learning Days is a really great opportunity to elevate all of the great work, but it's getting parents and students and teachers to know just what's possible. So we're at I would say pretty much in our first year. Even with COVID, we've been able to really make some movement at this time.
You said you couldn't see the chat, is that correct?
Yes, I can't see the
Okay,
chat.
so there was a question about like, how long did it take for us to launch and what was our initial financial model? My recollection is, a year to 18 months from when we first really started talking about it to it actually coming to being nationally recognized, probably a little over a year.
Yeah, a little bit, about a year.
The reason it took us that long is because having this outside fiscal agent from Penn State took some convincing, a lot of convincing and explanation as to what is it and what are we doing here, and how does the money flow, and risk management getting involved. I mean, and attorneys getting involved. And so all of that, and us doing our homework, really, with the Foundation for Enhancing Communities, we weren't the only group in Penn State that actually had a project under TFEC. So there had been a precedent set that other groups, were using an outside fiscal agent for certain projects, and we sort of leveraged that precedent. That was a good thing, I think, for us. But yeah, it was a little bit more complicated, I think, because of us being an institution of higher ed, lead STEM ecosystem.
Yeah, unless you have a foundation attached to if you have like a university foundation, they might even be able to serve as the fiscal agent. Because in this case, for example, Remake Learning Days, we offered $500 mini grants. If you were going to create an event or you had an event that aligned with Remake Learning Days goals, we wanted to, provide some funding for you to make your event more accessible and equitable to the communities you served. But in order to do that, it's not part of a grant. They're not a subcontract. It's literally them applying in a simple format to be able to get that funding from our foundation. And so it was really important to have that outside fiscal agent. Plus, we work with a group of 10 that are part of Pennsylvania Department of Ed, but we also have 2 that are part of our science centers. And we're rounding out our team with an industry rep as well. And so that's really important to have a team that's from different sectors is really critical. So their voices can be heard, but also as we were making decisions and financial decisions and providing funding, we needed a 501c3 to kind of protect us all and not just Kathy and myself at Penn State. And Penn State saw that. It did take time to explain how that could work. But building this into NSF grants and other grants, we're seeing that is starting to become successful. So that funding stays at the university. It doesn't have to go out to that fiscal agent because we're building in the work that Kathy and I both do. Especially
so the question was like, what was the initial funding model? And really it was us and our time, being covered by Penn State to get this ground. But then we are working with 5 intermediate units. And because the Pennsylvania Department of Education has prioritized having STEM ecosystems across the state, they are providing funding to the IUs for individuals to put time in the STEM ecosystem of their region. So we have that funding. It's not funding direct to Engine, but it's funding that basically covers the cost of a person putting effort in to making the STEM ecosystem successful. So there was another question about money. Amanda, can you go back to the slide that had the how the money flows diagram kind of thing? So yeah, on the left-hand side where it says federal funding agencies and the money comes in, we would build in Engine in here which would mostly, give Amanda a little funding for her salary. Any partners at Penn State that were being leveraged, funding would go in their direction. But then if we have outside entities that are part of Engine that are going to be supported on the grant, that money would go directly from Penn State to that entity. It would not go to TFEC. So you can see that there's no arrow going from Penn State to TFEC. That is not going to happen. And so that money would be hit with indirect. So, but that the grant itself would be hit with that amount of money. So if, say, Poseidon is our out of school time network of groups that provide out of school time programming. If we were to direct Poseidon some monies that they said they would need in order to do the work, the scope of work that's in the grant, that's what would be put into the grant. And then the as a consulting fee or that sort of thing that would be hit with indirect.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, Susan.
Hi, sorry, I can't turn on my camera because of my internet's pretty bad. Most likely,
that's fine.
so my apologies for that. So I was just interested in your experience with this funding model and the federal grants that come in through the university and sponsored programs. What we have found, because we operate in a similar kind of ecosystem within our own partnerships, it's not a network like of all partners in the state, but we've been around as a pre-college programs at Oregon State University for a while. So we actually explain our engagement model kind of the same way you're explaining. Here, the faculty, here are the programs and all the partners like the STEM hubs and all of that kind of stuff. Where we run into problems in there because of running grants through the university, it's when there are those grants like some there are now, there are rapid grants for youth education and the sponsors are not necessarily like NSF or USDA, and we run into a lot of problems. Having to create things that the sponsor don't ask us to create because of sponsor programs, or having to sit multiple times and go into long monthly conversations to find, because we fall in all of these gray areas that sponsor programs doesn't know how to deal with it, which ends it up pushing partners away. At points, people are ready to fund us to something now, and it's like, okay, I can give my money to someone else. This is too much. Or because we have to follow the system, the timing is not quite there. Like we have partners. This is the most difficult thing. We have partners that we spend a long time building partnerships with. They're intellectual partners, and we have problems sometimes putting them in the grant because we have to go through, what is it called? The word I'm trying to remember. We have to have a competition for services, which in turn doesn't allow us to do the partnership that we're trying to do. So we give up because either don't have the time to go through this, or we have partners that are intellectual partners, but not seen as intellectual partners. So that's a lot of kind of issues into having this kind of ecosystem and partners and trying to do the work with different kinds of fundings and sources and getting into these barriers at the institution level.
This is what it says.
Right. I would say our most complicated part in terms of timing and having people understand, say, federal funding is when we go to conceptualize the proposal and ask for a letter of support or commitment from them, or, it's not even a commitment. It's just a letter saying, if this were to be funded, we would support, say, our teachers going to this program, something like that. And it's not a have to, it's just a letter demonstrating some level of support for the BI section. And that, we submit it. It takes 6 to 8 months to hear from NSF or the other federal agency. And then if it doesn't come in, but we want to resubmit, like having that whole conversation, and then and this sort of expectation that money comes quickly and it doesn't, and then like how the money can be spent, having those kinds of conversations. Once the budget is set, money, it's hard to like reallocate money to different kinds of things. There's strict rules
Yeah.
with that, and it's really difficult for them to understand. But we have those conversations quite often, both internally at Penn State and externally.
Yeah, and I would even add, so for example, our Chief Science Officers program, which just got started, is partially funded by an NSF grant, which is allowing for a person at CSATs to really work on this. It's providing that effort to lead the Chief Science Officers program through Penn State and through the ecosystem. But we also have a charitable contribution for the CSO program, which is very critical because it allows other partners to be involved in the CSO program as well. And so it's just two different mechanisms for the same program, but with the money flowing from federal, from an NSF grant, and with all the parameters that we know around NSF, it's easier to say, this is going to pay for this person's time and their salary to build out the program, lead the program. But in order to have some other partners, we can utilize our charitable donations through the ecosystem's fiscal agent, which is the Foundation for Enhancing Communities, for other components of that program, because we have it under engine of Central PA. So it was two different ways of thinking about how to get this program running with multiple partners, in a quicker fashion.
That's key. That's key. I wish we had a foundation like that. That's not, because even through the institutional foundation now, if any project we have a deliverable, it has to be routed to sponsor programs.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like that before, but now it is. So that has taken away this angle for us in certain ways. And it's not about us trying to avoid to do what we need to do. It's just because sometimes those regulations get in the way of the project actually happening or us getting funded to do it. So I appreciate your answer. I'll follow up on an email with other questions. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. One other question. How does Engine decide which PI grants to accept and which ones to not accept? And how long of a runway do you require for new projects, et cetera? So it's pretty commonplace for people to come to us at the last minute. And even like the budget is set and they just want us to, add a letter of commitment from either Engine or CSATs, and the answer is no, because we have to, first of all, CSATs is a self-funded center, so we have to be built into the budget. And then Engine, if there's any effort that Engine is going to put forth as part of the broader impacts, that effort has to be built in as well. So we usually say, we'd like a couple month lead time before the proposal has to go in. However, if it's a larger grant that maybe even has multiple institutions on the grant, that could mean that Amanda and I are reaching out to another STEM ecosystem and trying to start some dialogue about this proposal and what institutions are part of it and what is it about and what partners do they have that we might be able to leverage and those kinds of things. And that takes a huge amount of time. And proposal preparation is not covered on any grant anywhere. But in any case, it's pretty labor intensive at times, especially if, like I said, if it's a multi-institutional grant and we want to, pull in other ecosystems to basically show the network that will be represented on the proposal. We don't really have criteria for accepting or not accepting certain grants for, in terms of addressing their broader impacts. I would say it's more of a timing issue and whether or not the budget can sort of withstand what we would require for our part. Those are always the two major things, I think, that kind of decide yay or nay whether or not we can be involved. I hope that answers your question. So the next question is, how do you determine how much the proposer needs to put in for engine or your center, and do you negotiate with the PI? It's always negotiation, absolutely. I would say that we have some ideas now of how much time certain things are taking us. And some things we're still learning. So we take a stab at how much effort we think we need to build in to the proposal. A lot of it is, leveraging engine to make connections to schools, to teachers, to come to our programs. I mean, so CSATS is focused on teacher professional development. So that's really sort of the focus of my work. But then if we wanted, to impact informal teachers that are doing more work in informal settings, whether that's a science center, a museum, a library, an after-school program, what have you, we can leverage engine to get information out about opportunities for them to come to programs that we'll be offering. That is not a ton of time, but that is having that network is extremely powerful for us to be able to reach our stakeholders. But yes, I would say the budget is always a negotiation, no matter what. And if you want to talk to me at some point after ARIS about, having those conversations, I'm more than happy to meet with whomever to talk through that.
I have another question if somebody else doesn't have one. I've already went once, but I don't see any in there.
Nope, that's it. Go ahead, Susan.
How, being, that you housed in Penn State, how does undergraduate and graduate education coming into this network, if it comes at all? And I ask this question because you probably hear those questions as well from the university and leadership side of things. How do you support the actual mission of the university, which we know how they don't see it directly unless you're training them, training the grads or doing, you know what I mean? So how do you incorporate that into that ecosystem?
So right now, Penn State has a strong mission around engaged scholarship, looking at how to get students involved with their community right out of the gate. So this network, as I've been forming partnerships, can really help look at ways of creating more pathways for undergraduates, especially for engaged scholarship opportunities, whether it's working with the after school time network or it's working with our local parks and rec agencies. It's a different way into working on some kind of community-based project, but also we're just starting to have conversations with some of different academic clubs that want to work with K through 12 and going through Engine of Central PA to do so. For example, our engineering ambassadors at Penn State want to do more directly with schools. And we're looking at ways to say, let's first host a webinar so that teachers know what you're offering. So it's another way to say we can help you elevate what you're doing and seeing which schools would like to work with you. And that's another angle and a benefit to Penn State is having that platform and having a lot of different partners at the table, especially school districts, charter schools, and private schools. So that's one great angle that we're seeing right now from the outreach perspective, how to work with the undergraduates and graduate students, especially if they're involved with academic clubs and they want to work more with K through 12. I think Kathy might even chime in about through the Center for Science in Schools, how graduate students are built into grants and getting an opportunity to work directly with teachers.
Yeah, I would say it's not necessarily directly related to Engine, but any of the programs that we're going to build that involve teachers or pre-college students, we try to incorporate graduate students in any way, shape, or form that we can. That means if we're running say a week-long workshop in the summertime, graduate students are going to help design, create, and deliver sessions in those workshops in ways that the teachers will be learning what it is they do in their technical research. that's one thing. And then it's a great way for them to be thinking about how to communicate to non-technical audiences. We deem teachers as a non-technical audience. The other thing that I would say is a little bit peripheral, but it is some ways that we have been able to incorporate undergraduate students, particularly those in engineering and computer science. There is a capstone project that many of the undergrads complete. It could be deemed like an engaged scholarship type of thing, but it could also just be, some other project that they wanted to take on as their capstone. And we have worked with 2 undergraduate teams to help pre-college students engage in meteorology modeling that's using large data sets. And if you know of what kinds of computational resources K-12 students are being provided today, they're mostly Chromebooks or iPads, which have no computational power whatsoever. And so we've worked with them twice. 2 separate undergrad teams have helped us to basically build web-based resources for students to be able to do computational work in the cloud, and been quite successful with that. So we look for opportunities to engage both undergrad and graduate level students in our work, and postdocs even.
Great, thank you.
All right, I don't see any additional questions in the chat at this point. Amanda, you said again you were going to be posting the link to the National STEM Learning Ecosystem website.
Yes. Once we get out of here, I'll make sure to get that you have that information and the White House document for
And the
you
White House
for university.
Yeah.
But also feel free to contact us, especially with broader impacts, specifically with Kathy, but I'm happy to help with connecting you to your STEM ecosystem if you're not directly involved. There are very few that are connected to a university or led by university. One is UC Irvine and us. I'm not sure of any other universities that are in that the lead type of situation, but UC Irvine and Penn State are. So and UC Irvine, we went out to visit them for quite some time to understand this process and how they got started. And that was really important when going to Penn State leadership to say, there's another university doing this. It was quite helpful.
I would say one of the complex things about and different between UC Irvine and ourselves is they have a huge donor. They have, huge amount of financial support to make their ecosystem run. And we do not. Like I said, we're in a very rural part of the state, and there aren't a lot of huge foundations or industries, looking to, drop a bunch of money on a STEM ecosystem in the middle of Pennsylvania. So it means that we are working hard to build that network and to find ways for the industries and companies and foundations that we do have within our network that they can give what they can give, and we make that work for us.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. I'll make sure to add those resources for you. And I hope you all have a great day and finishing up with the conference.